Imagine watching the series Game of Thrones and traveling to the fictional King's Landing, filmed in Croatia, or coming to Rotterdam to attend the International Film Festival. These are examples of film tourism, the phenomenon of people traveling to places associated to audiovisual media. Nowadays, film tourism is a very lucrative and highly organized business, often supported by large governmental investments. It's not uncommon to hear stories of places that experience significant economic gains due to film and TV projects. These stories are often summarized by the media in catchy terms such as the Downton or the Braveheart effect. In Brazil, however, I found a very different scenario, one in which film tourism only occurs in spontaneous and unexpected ways across the country. Despite the strengths of the Brazilian film and tourism industries, governmental efforts to invest in the synergy between the two have been largely lacking. On top of that, film tourism often happens in vulnerable locations, such as the favelas or small villages in the Amazon. So by analyzing the case of film tourism in Brazil, my goal was to broaden the scope of the research field, which has so far mainly focused on successful cases in the global north. Instead, I wanted to review how unplanned forms of film tourism might pose challenges to local communities. I did this by answering the question: how do film tourism initiatives in vulnerable locations in Brazil develop over time, and how do members of the communities involved perceive, experience, and evaluate these initiatives? I examined 3 case studies: telenovela tourism in favelas of Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, a city branding project in a remote town in northeast Brazil, and a film festival in an environmentally sensitive village in the Brazilian Amazon. From 2017 to 2020, I conducted participant observation in visits to these locations and did semi-structured interviews with 61 local stakeholders, like tour guides, community leaders, policymakers, and local entrepreneurs. I found out that film tourism initiatives are mostly met with optimism by these community members, who expect to enjoy long-lasting benefits that film tourism might bring. But often these projects end up in disappointment for them, as they do not live up to these high expectations. In the end, communities are left with only temporary benefits, which makes them feel frustrated and sometimes even exploited. I have coined the term telenovela effect to refer to these temporary outcomes of film tourism. But I also wanted to understand what could potentially cause the telenovela effect. So I identified various factors that highly influence the development of film tourism. Think of socioeconomic characteristics of locations, the existence or non-existence of political structures to support film tourism, and power dynamics within the internal management of such projects. My findings challenge 2 common discourses in cultural and creative policymaking. The first one is the idea of investing in the creative industries to revitalize struggling economies. The telenovela effect counters the celebratory narrative around film tourism development and shows that this strategy cannot simply be applied everywhere and anywhere. The second is the idea of involving communities in creative projects to ensure that there will be a positive impact. I found the telenovela effect in all cases of my research, even in initiatives that promise to generate long-term gains and meaningfully involve local stakeholders. So even though I advocate for community participation in creative projects, I do argue that this is a complex endeavor that does not always guarantee success for creative initiatives. With my dissertation, I want to draw attention to the responsibility of creative entrepreneurs and policymakers when engaging with local communities. By disclosing the potentially negative effects that their projects and policies might have, I encourage more equitable practices towards local communities and the formulation of long-term cultural policies that prioritize their wishes and needs. I think this is an important step towards more sustainable forms of film tourism, particularly in vulnerable locations in the global south.